Hi, welcome back to Damnit Jax. I'm a doctor. I'm excited to be back for my second episode, and I'd like everybody to please welcome Dr. Agnieszka Piotrowska, an award-winning filmmaker and academic who now is a life coach and scholars mentor. Agnieszka, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Yeah, no, thank you. Wonderful to be here and chat to you.
We met not too long ago, sort of via LinkedIn, as so many academics do these days. Please, I'd love to hear about what you did your PhD in and where you completed it. We'll start way back at the very beginning, and then we'll work up to the amazing work you're doing now.
So I did my PhD at University of London at Birkbeck, and the subject of the thesis was psychoanalysis and ethics in documentary film. And the thesis, actually, I had a book contract before I finished the PhD, yes, with Routledge. So it was published quite quickly as a monograph first time, so like 2013 or 2013, I think. And then it was republished as second edition in 2023 with additional chapters and things as well. So, I mean, in terms of my own journey, because you said you've asked me to be clear about that. So it was quite kind of curious thing, because I was working very much as a successful documentary filmmaker. I had a company. I was working stuff. I was making documentaries for National Geographic and Discovery and BBC and Channel 4 through the company, but I was BBC trained, and it was kind of a whole thing. And relatively speaking, because given that it is some time ago, I was really very successful also in terms of business. So I was doing all things, and I was also making a documentary for BBC One, actually, this is in 2009. And the film was called The Best Job in the World. And it was about this campaign in Australia, which seduced young people into applying for this supposedly amazing position. But in fact, it was kind of like an advertising campaign. There's nothing wrong with it. But there was this kind of issue of what we see, what is the truth behind this. And that was kind of thing that I was doing as I was thinking about doing the PhD. And I was interested in the relationship between the filmmaker, so very much myself and others, and the subject of their films, and what happens in that relationship, and how and why people agree to be in somebody else's films, which they had no control over in terms of the edit. And it was kind of interesting and it is very interesting to think about these hidden mechanisms. What happens, why people give you their stories, and what happens afterwards. And so when I've started looking at it carefully, even before doing the PhD, it's quite interesting that there is a lot of sort of historical evidence in how people are not happy with the films after they're finished, even when clearly the piece of work has served them well. I mean, the classic one is Errol Morris' Thin Blue Line, when the Errol Morris actually contributed dramatically. His documentary made the main character free because he was imprisoned. He may have died. He was on a death row, and yet he still sued him for the rights to his own life. I think the sense of losing control of one's story when you in a documentary film is a massive issue, and it's not a new problem. I mean, it's quite a different moment in time now, and people, of course, can do their own thing, and they can ask for right to see the cut and all the rest of it. And mostly social media, I think, changed the landscape dramatically. But the issues still remain. They always remain, because the issues are to do with power and control, asymmetrical power relations. Who is in charge? and why, and what can you do to redress this relationship, if at all. So my PhD was looking at the issue of transference out
Okay.
of the clinic, you could say, basically. So whilst the documentary work was indeed the main focus, but it also looked, and this is quite controversial, to what extent we deal with transference, which is a deep and unconscious attachment to somebody in position of power in other walks of life, like education, politics, and so on. I mean, there's, you know, the Stockholm syndrome, which is where the hostages fall desperately in love with their captives. It's fundamentally a profound transference because somebody's in charge, somebody's in a position of power. If they choose, they could kill you, of course. If they give you bits of kindness, then you're delighted. I mean, it's completely crazy. I think it's such a wonderful thing, this whole story of transference out of the clinic, that I'm so happy I did a PhD about it then. And I still forever am fascinated by it. And of course, Judith Butler, you know, arguably, I think she's the most amazing philosopher, or they are the amazing philosopher alive. Judith Butler was a visiting professor at Berkeley when I was there. And so her work, The Secret Life of Power, was something also very inspirational in my own work too. Now, of course, when you sort of arrive at a decision, I mean, my decision to do the PhD was considered by literally everybody, all and sundry, all my family, friends, colleagues, like some sort of craziness, because I was doing so well in the media, and it is hard, and it was always hard to be successful in sort of television and so on. I was running this business, and I was a single mother to begin with before I got married again. So it was kind of a curious thing. Some people said that I'm self-sabotaging, you know, that I'm kind of, because I'm successful in one thing, that doing this PhD was somehow trying to destroy my career.
That's
And
interesting.
yes, for no apparent reason. Why on earth would I do the PhD? So then I thought, no, I'm really interested in this. Now, in this kind of mechanism, what happens? And I wanted to have time, I wanted to have space to do my own thinking. I had done, just before the PhD, I had done postgraduate diploma in applied psychology, because my first and second degrees, my BA and MA are completely in humanities, languages, and theatre and drama. MA is in drama from Reading. So then I was making documentary films. Then I did an applied, I told you I'm a lifelong learner. Then I did this applied diploma in psychology. And then I was thinking, okay, now that's it. Am I going to really go for it, for this PhD? So I then, you know, as one does, looked around at various institutions, looked around at what there is. I suppose I shouldn't say really, but I had offers from very prestigious or quite prestigious institutions. I even had a full scholarship from one.
Okay.
Turned them down to go to Bergberg because of the supervisors. And my supervisors, my director of studies was Stephen Frosch, who's a very famous psychologist and psychoanalytical thinker. And wonderful writer, and Laura Mulvey, you know, famous Laura Mulvey, who who is in
Incredible.
film studies. And also because I was looking for people who treated psychoanalysis very seriously as a tool to explore various phenomena in life, not just some kind of fancy idea or just being in the clinic. So it was not completely easy to find these people. So I didn't, to begin with, I did not get a scholarship at Berkeley. So I started as part-time student, self-financing, and after the first year, I got the college scholarship because, of course, I was such a brilliant student. So then they rewarded me, and so then it was fine. And also another thing was about that whole thing, that because I wanted to the project of sort of changing the world is not a new project. So I had this idea that I would be an academic teacher in a place which needed, which perhaps wasn't too fancy in terms of university, but in which I could really contribute. And so even again, before I finished, so I did finish my PhD in 3 years flat.
Wow.
I had a publishing contract. My Viva, in fact, I did pass with no corrections. It was all marvelous.
Congratulations.
So nobody would know that there were any dramas or crises in the middle of the journey, but I will tell you. But
Please, please, because that's, first of all, I want to say, I mean, I said congratulations. I want to emphasize how big a deal it is to pass with no corrections. That is a very rare thing. So that's huge. That's a huge congratulations to your
okay,
efforts.
so I tell you something though, because it is kind of quite fun to think about it. So there were so many strange things. So I arrive at Bergbock full of trepidation and full of excitement as a mature student already, with all sorts of successes in my life, and with not completely. And I knew I can easily survive for a year and well, but then after that I'd have to keep making films and doing stuff. And my director of studies, Sir Stephen Frosch, said to me, you have to promise that for 1 year, you will just focus on this PhD and focus on learning completely new things. It's like learning a language. Can you do that? And I said, yes. And he said, no, this is a big decision. Either you're promising or not promising. So I said, no, I promise. For 1 year, I'll be a complete full-time student of yours. And so that's what happened. So I did I also did, I am a crazy life learner. I really like it, but I did this MA, which they had at psychosocial department, in a sort of applied philosophy. And I did it without, it's called, I audited it as well for the year. So I really learned the tools, which I then felt were needed. But in the first 6 weeks, the way it was organized, there was another member of the supervisory team, whom I will not mention. She was a much more junior academic. She was kind of learning how to be a supervisor, I guess. And I think maybe because I wasn't 23 anymore, and I had these successes. I don't know, for whatever reason you wish to consider, she was extremely difficult. I'm sure she didn't set out to be horrible to me, but my perception was that she was truly horrible, and she made me feel like I couldn't do it. It's not a mountain I was going to be able to climb. That it's different to be a creative person relative to academic work. I mean, my goodness me. And this was such a kind of shocking thing, because I started feeling, everybody now famously says this words, I'm not enough, and I am enough, but without saying it exactly like this, that's what I felt. I felt inadequate. I felt this is a disaster. And at the same time, because I just made this documentary, The Best Job in the World, which screened that summer. So I started in September, and in the summer of 2009, that documentary screened, and it wiped everybody off the screen. So it was also very commercially successful, had huge audiences. So people were contacting me saying, do you want to make a film for us as a freelance? And I was saying, no, I'm doing a PhD, and I promised not to do any work as I'm doing this PhD, even though I was registered as a part-time student. And I'm thinking, I've actually gone crazy. I'm thinking to myself, yes, it is maybe self-destructive. Why on earth am I doing this? So I thought, that's it. I'm going to give up. 6 weeks in, and I walk in. So I go to see the director of the graduate school, and her name is Lynn Siegel. She's a very famous feminist professor. She's still very much alive in her 80s. I love her dearly. Whoever knows Lynn Siegel loves her dearly. She's such a character. She's fantastic. Full of radical beings. Amazing. So I go into her office and I cry. I'm in floods of tears. And I say, I can't do this. I'm going to leave. It's a nightmare. And she says, what nonsense is this? Stop crying. It will. And she also says, I am. And even then she was like mid-70s. So she has these red hair and a little suitcase. She says, I'm busy because I'm going to Norway, on some adventure conference, but let's briefly talk. And this is what you must do. You must not give up, first of all. Secondly, you just go to Stephen Frosch, and I'll talk to him, she says, and ask for this person, this auxiliary supervisor, to be removed for the time, maybe for a year or maybe forever, because she's making you feel uncomfortable. And that's what needs to happen. So that was it. And she says, oh, it'll be fine. It's just what happens, people get upset. You just keep going. So that's what happened. So they removed that person for a while, and then I kept going. And I loved it. I really loved it. I loved my time. I mean, there are always moments of darkness when you do a PhD, always. You always think, I mean, everybody, I've had, I think, formally 10 completions. Since, meaning my students, 10 of them got their PhDs, but I've mentored and coached loads of people, and everybody, there's no exception. Even, I could say I had a fabulous time, no problem, and then I got some college distinction as well, everything marvelous. It's not true. It's simply not true. However good you are, in the middle of the journey, there will be issues. And another thing was, the system changes, but at the time, so this is now 2000 and maybe 10, when you have this, or 11, when you have this exam, which is, it was called upgrade. This is now sometimes called part 1 or 2, right? When you have to actually, that they assess.
Yes, when you go from MPhil officially to PhD, right?
So, of course, I've already written quite a lot. And also, I really was in a good position to talk about this work, being a filmmaker. So, anyway, so the upgrade at Bergberg it was a big deal. It was like actually, it was like a committee. I don't know what your upgrade was like, but mine was like these 5 people sitting there.
Oh, wow. That's intense.
Yeah. Yeah, it was really intense. And your supervised director of studies is not supposed to say anything. So my main theoretical paradigm was Jacques Lacan, the psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan, right? So not, for example, something else, Freud. I mean, everything is Freud, but this was my main theoretical paradigm, and various other thinkers, but certainly in terms of psychoanalysis, this was Lacan, and I suppose I'm still, if not Lacanian, then post-Lacanian for sure, if anything. So it stays with you. I've just written an article too, and it is my main theoretical paradigm. So there's a conversation about it and my chapters and this and that, all going well. And then somebody says, are you a feminist? Would you define yourself as a feminist? And I say, absolutely, of course, obviously. And then they say, how, being a feminist, could you possibly take Jacques Lacan as your main paradigm, given that the main master signifier is the phallus? This is what they say. Now, I am very happy to talk about it, why and how and what it means now. At that point, I literally sit there thinking, this is really true. This is very true. How can I be a feminist, and a Lacanian? And I sit there, and the aforementioned Lynn Siegel again sits right in front of me. Stephen just thinks, oh, she'll speak in a minute, because I sit there not saying anything.
Wow.
And as you can see, I usually just go, and I sit there thinking, what can I say? I can't say anything. And I sit like this. And I think I just have to get up and leave. That's it. It's another moment when this whole thing almost collapsed, And I sit there like this. And Lynn says, Agnieszka, perhaps you could talk about master signifiers, the signifier of loss. And I said, yes, thank you, Len. And I was away. But it was kind of touch and go, it really was. It really was. And she knew it because she knew me well. There was these, and she wasn't, as I say, Len wasn't particularly, she's very, very, very famous feminist. And she's still very much involved in writing radical things. She wasn't on my supervisory team, but she was so important in this whole journey because I think it's important that somebody would push you now and again when you get stuck.
Yes, I mean, the thing that I'm sensing and I find this to be true. The universe, you can pick a university because of whatever, the program is good or the prestige is there or you like the location. A number of reasons you could pick a specific university, but the people that are in the team of support around you seems to be, especially from what you're saying, so important. The supervisor relationship, the supervisor of those people, the head of the department, this woman, Lynn Siegel, seems to have been just a profound impact on your studies. And had she not been there, you could have dropped out.
Well, I could have dropped out for sure to begin with. I think even had I failed this upgrade, I'm sure I would have retaken it. But the upgrades, there was certainly not my kind of a moment, definitely not a moment of glory. I sort of just got through it. And actually had, so I passed the upgrades with quite major corrections and because they also wanted me to really know that I needed to do some work, which I did. So when it came to the Viva, so I always prepare my students really well for the Viva. So I don't do just one mock Viva. We do endless preparation so that they know and the nerves are there and they know what to expect. And they know that if things that techniques, breathing and so on, when really you feel that you're being attacked, and still happens during vivas, then you can still recover well. So, but nobody particularly trained me. But I knew though, I trained myself. So I grabbed people and say, here are the questions, would you ask me? And I would practice answers. And, because of this issue that occasionally I can get stuck and not speak, and I've really had to train myself not to do that anymore. So my Viva was, and everybody remembers the Viva, it's like having, intimate encounter for the first time, right? So everybody remembers what happened during your Viva, I think.
Yeah.
And my Viva, because it's a transdisciplinary project, so I had a psychologist and a film scholar at this Viva. And the psychoanalyst gave me such a hard time over the transference out of the clinic. And this time, because you're defending your PhD, your thesis, you're defending your whole work and your concept. Mine was so radical that either I was going to be able to defend it or frankly not. And actually, as this is all happening, I suddenly realized that this is not a conversation about some minor corrections, that he's literally thinking in his mind, am I going to pass this woman or not? I really thought actually he might fail me. He might decide, because he had a massive problem with transference out of the clinic. And the first thing is, he was wrong, because even Freud talks about transference out of the clinic, the deep attachment to somebody in power. And we see it all the time. How do you suppose various politicians get elected? It's a fantasy world as well, what this person could do for you.
Sure. I mean, we're seeing it now with what's the phrase, parasocial relationships.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's sort of, so one of the documentaries I made, they Married to the Eiffel Tower, of course, it's again this profound transfer into these objects. It's all internal, of course, it's a defense, but against trauma and so on. Anyway, so this went on and on, this Viva. And I was sort of quite enjoying it, because this time I wasn't that scared, because I thought he's just wrong. I know my stuff here. And he kept saying, could you not say like transference? Could you not say the unconscious mechanisms in these documentary Encounter and others is like transference, but not transference. I said, no, no, no. I'm sorry, it is transference. So that was it. So then they, as you know, they ask you to leave the room. This was all in person, of course. This was 2012. And then I got in and they just stood up and say, congratulations, Dr. Piotrowska. There you have it.
Oh, I'm so glad.
I know it was, but I also have to say that, and my director of studies, who was always behind me, Stephen Frosch, who, he's a very different supervisor to the supervisor I am, because I am much more present in people's lives. I hold on to the relationships going on. He was much more traditional boundaries, professor and the student. But he was excellent, gave me feedback and so on, but it was kind of a distance relationship. And I probably was a troublesome student. I'm sure. For I know I was difficult, and kind of because I always questioned everything nonstop, obviously. But anyway, we got out and they say, well done, da, da, da. And then we both went out and then we did go for a drink, unusually. But was, I was a doctor, I wasn't his student anymore. And he said, this was the best 5 I've seen ever. You've done really
Oh,
well.
wow. That's
Well,
amazing. I
because
mean, they
it
are
was, I
hard.
mean, it was a proper kind of, I really did feel, oh, here we go. The examiner's attacking me. But then I was prepared, I was ready, and I was sweet and calm, but resolute. And it was amazing. So your Viva, I think, can be an amazing thing. It should be a moment of triumph. You should feel, I am the expert. This is what I tell my students. You must feel you are the expert in the room. You know more about your subjects than these other guys. You just do.
And that's this interesting part of the journey, right? Is you're going from student to expert. That's the point of a PhD, right? Is moving from learner to leader in this area, and potentially one of the only people that knows this much about this one thing in the world, potentially. And it can be hard to have that confidence.
I mean, I think, at the minute, so people always, I've recently been asked on some podcasty thing, what a curious journey from the filmmaker, to being an academic and a writer, and of course, and mentoring people also as a thing that I do, and as psychologist, all these things together. And I say, well, first of all, I think it's deeply unfortunate that there is this kind of perception that a person can just be one thing.
Mm.
And particularly in the current the world we live in, it's exactly the opposite. We all have to, I think it's helpful to be many things, and thinking of yourself as a creative person who has these various tools that you can use in the world, right? So that's the kind of first thing to say. But the second thing to say is I feel that I always had this gift for recognizing the other person's feeling. I guess I'm a sort of it's called an empath, so you can take energy in as well, which can be difficult as well. So you have to learn how to deal with it. But so I just feel that the documentary project, and that's what my PhD was about, potentially can be unethical because somebody gives you something out of love, because transference in a way is a form of love, as you say, in parasocial things,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
forever are putting on social media that they're madly in love with various people, like, I don't know, Taylor Swift. Although I
Sure.
am in love with Taylor Swift, so I can understand that.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Um, yeah, I'm writing a little thing about Taylor Swift and her writing. I think she's really great
He is great.
and very clever.
Yeah. Swifties aren't going to come for us. We're pro Taylor Swift. We're
Oh, very much so. No, absolutely. But also, is this kind of thing in terms of, in terms of my own journey and the PhD, and what happens later is that it's very easy to then be, how should I say it politely? universities or institutions because they want you to be part of the system, and indeed to be able to work at a university at all, you have to be part of the system, and that is right and proper. However, it is also very important to hold on to your notion of who you are and that you're an ethical person, and that you, particularly as a creative person, that you want to experiment and have the right to do so. Everybody who I've worked for and everybody in the university system would say, of course, experiment. We welcome experimentation. In my experience of higher education institutions in the UK, but also probably elsewhere, no. This is not true. They discourage experimentation. There's an experimentation which is like this. Yeah, experiment as long as you do what I tell you to do, and as long as this is, immediately successful. Whereas anybody who has done anything creative which has been successful will know and will tell you that you must be prepared to fail, and that this is fine. On to the next thing. But I'm afraid, which is why I want to empower people, international students, research students, but also other creative people, into stepping into their light and finding ways of being creative outside, inside and outside systems, but also holding on to their sense of self.
And is that what you're spending most of your time doing now?
No, most of the time I'm spending time equally doing a variety of things. I wouldn't say I spend most of time life coaching, but I spend quite a lot of time mentoring people. I'm doing quite a lot of writing and thinking, academic and non-academic, absolutely. Fair amount of learning new skills as well, and teaching. I'm still very much involved with 2 institutions part-time, but I am supervising PhD students, and I do want them, at least my students, to feel empowered to experiment.
I think that's so, I just think that's so true. And I do agree. I think we're losing that aspect of what higher education was originally intended. It was supposed to be a playground of learning, a place that you could go and fail freely and try new things, and especially in the creative fields. If you can't fail while you're learning, when can you? Um, you need a place that you can do something ridiculous that might not work, that might fail, because you're willing to try it. Because then you learn from that, and you might push yourself to do something great from that learning. So I so agree that it's so important to make
It's super
mistakes.
important, and I think, in terms of my experience of it, of course, there's some wonderful, truly wonderful people and my colleagues within university systems, but very often, we're looking to the leaders and senior managers to create spaces in which these situations can happen freely, the situations of experimentation and creativity. And unfortunately, it is not always possible. And also, there's this whole issue which we haven't talked about, but which is important, is the definition of success. What is success? You need to, obviously, there is a sense in which, well, I would always say to anybody who I am either life coaching or mentoring or anybody, that it is very important to have some system whereby you're going to survive, meaning some financial structures. But it's also important to have a variety of ways in which you're going to make a living, so that you're not dependent on people who want to restrict your creativity. And at the minute, there's loads of ways of doing that, which one can explore, and people are exploring social media, other ways, all kinds of things. So, for example,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And so, I'm also very interested, one of the core things that I'm doing at the minute is also empowering international research students, because I think it's wonderful that people come and to this country, and others, particularly, of course, people who don't have maybe English as the first language, and then all kinds of things happen and can go wrong. The issue of mental health, there is research. There's one proper research carried out by BBC a few years ago, massive sample of people, thousands, and it appears that 70% of international students, 70%, 70, suffer from mental health issues induced by a sense of
Wow.
loneliness,
Wow.
hopelessness. And of course, most people would, because there is still a stigma around mental health, and I'm sure there'll be stigma around mental health forever, they may or may not seek help.
Yeah.
And so then it goes on and on in all kinds of peculiar ways, So, I think it's important to catch people as well, if it's possible, in the space in between kind of being full of beans and life, and maybe really needing medical intervention. But there is a space, I
There
believe.
is. Yeah. Oh no, preventative care is where we need, is so hugely important. Getting to people before they're in crisis. Yeah.
So on this occasion, I see we might be running out
We
of time.
are just about out of time.
Well, there's still a little bit of time. I wanted to say that also what I'm very interested in is the whole thing of creative practice research and making shorter forms like video essays. And I think in terms of creativity, because also it's inexpensive or free to make, and I think you can do a lot of things with it in terms of creative endeavors for myself and also for other people.
I think that's such a good passion, and so important. Um, we have the 2 minutes left. I want to fly through my silly questionnaire with you, to finish off. So my first question is, if you could order anything's available, what do you order for ice cream cone?
Listen, I'm in Poland just now. There is a ice cream which is called Malaga,
Okay.
like the ice cream is with rum and raisins. It's the most delicious thing. And now that you've mentioned it, I shall march out of my little flat and
You'll
buy
have
it.
to get some.
Absolutely.
We have that in the US. We call it rum raisin. But you can't get it in the UK.
Yeah.
Okay. Um,
So good.
it's so good. What is your favorite, like, guilty pleasure, if to use this societal phrase? It can be something you read, watch, listen to.
You know already, Taylor Swift.
Taylor Swift,
Music
excellent.
videos and stuff. And there's a song called Exile. Do you know it?
Yes, I
It's a
do.
most astonishing piece of work and isn't particularly, relatively speaking, that well known. I just think it's amazing. And also another of her amazing songs, You're on Your Own, Kid. Actually, it's wonderful. It's almost better than meditation.
Um, so it's so good. We're gonna run out of time very quickly, but I'm gonna skip to, if you could go back and study something else, what would it be as a lifelong learner?
I keep studying new things, I am I tell you what, Latin American studies, and my Spanish is crap, and I feel
Wow.
wonderful. Oh, yeah.
That's such an interesting. I was not expecting that answer. Well, I'm going to leave it there because we're about to run out of time. But thank you so much for joining me today, and please like, review, rate, subscribe, comment, give us your thoughts, and I will be back again with a new guest for Damn It, Jax. I'm a doctor. Thanks so much.